Did Black Adam from the DC Universe and Warner Brothers Studios actually make money? Well, according to its star, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, in a recent tweet and a newly updated article from Deadline magazine, he suggests that it did. But what is the real movie math? Let's figure it out. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's great to see all of you out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video that may not yet be subscribed to this channel, please take a moment, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. YouTube loves the comments. We are screaming towards 16,000 subscribers and approaching a 2-year anniversary here in just about a month and a half. So thank you all to everybody that continues to watch and to all the new faces out there that continue to subscribe and drive this channel. We appreciate each and every one of you. Now, Dwayne Johnson in the last 24 to 48 hours really made a nice public statement out there about Black Adam, a movie that a lot of fans have enjoyed, and I'm happy for them. It seems like it was really kind of a fun film from everything I've heard. I've not yet had the chance to watch it, to be completely honest. That being said, I was rooting for it in the box office. It seems like, usually when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson does a film, whether it does tremendously or mediocre or even poorly, they always tend to be kind of fun films, and that's great for audiences out there, and I love it. But did this movie actually make money? Well, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson tweeted just a couple of days ago that, in fact, yes, it was profitable for Warner Brothers and for the DC Universe. But was it really? Let's take a look at some actual numbers out there. We've talked about this film before on some box office videos here on Valiant Renegade. So what does all this mean? Were we wrong? Were we wrong when we looked at the box office data and said, man, this movie's going to lose about $100 million or more, versus now what The Rock is saying? Let's take a look at a few things and put them into perspective. So as we look here from the numbers, which is pretty much free from any type of editorial issues, they just report the math, the data, what is. Domestic box office for Black Adam stands currently, as of the time of this recording, at $165.4 million. That is U.S. and Canadian markets. International box office at just a hair shy of $219 million, for a total worldwide or global cumulative haul, or global cum, of $384.415 million. Based on the most recently available data from places like AMC Theaters and their financial reporting, we know that domestically, the rentals tend to return to movie studios and their distributors to the tune of about 51% or so on average as of right now. Internationally, that return is closer to 40%. So we have to take that into account of that gross box office. 51 to 52%, maybe in that range. We can be generous to go as high as 53% in some cases. Returned off that $165.4 million, and closer to 40% of that $218.9 or $219 million would have been returned to Warner Brothers from that international box office. When we scroll down and look at the details, the total production budget as listed in this case by the numbers, which tends to be fairly accurate, at least in terms of the data that is publicly made available, $200 million in production budget. This, of course, again, does not include a marketing budget, which for a film like this, we can easily assume is somewhere to the neighborhood of $100 million. That means Warner Brothers and DC Studios had a total all-in cost of somewhere around $300 million. So if we figure somewhere to the neighborhood of 51% of the domestic box office returned and 40% or so of the international box office returned back to Warner Brothers distribution, that means that Black Adam's distribution haul, the net return after the theaters took their cuts both here in the domestic market and in the international markets, would be somewhere around $170 million. But that's $130 million shy of the all in cost by Warner Brothers Studios. So how then does Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson purport that this movie is actually profitable? This gets into a longer conversation of post-theatrical revenues, something that we don't dive into terribly often here, but far more often than most, quite honestly. Because while traditionally those post-theatrical revenues have been critical to most movies' financial success for the last many, many decades, that dynamic has changed dramatically just even in the last 5 years with the advent of proprietary streaming services and how big they've become, and what that has done to the post-theatrical market for many of these studios and distributors. Let's take a look at the Deadline article. From Deadline, Dwayne Johnson's DC pick, Black Adam to profit. Here's how. There is some snarking going on out there that Black Adam is poised to lose $50 to $100 million. And again, our figures are closer to $100 to $130 million. Deadline film finance sources, meaning people who do this for a living, and those close to the film, say this movie is bound to break even and be in the black. With global grosses of $390 million, a $195 million production cost, a P&A, that's prints and advertising or global marketing spend, between $80 to $100 million. The New Line Dwayne Johnson film is looking to net between $52 to $72 million. Right off the bat, you're probably asking yourself, well, how is that possible? The math just doesn't seem to work. But again, I go back to what I said before. When we talk about box office profitability and return on investment, we are looking strictly at the box office. This is a new day and age. Let's walk back here just 5 years to even just 30 to 40 years ago at this point and think about how movies were distributed. If a big movie came out, or any movie came out, let's say whether it was 1982 or 2012, it really doesn't matter. They had a very similar pattern in terms of distribution. They first reached theaters where they had their box office haul. The next step down the line was, once they exited theaters, was to be made available to rental houses, whether it was Blockbuster or Family Video or Redbox in the more recent days. It really doesn't matter. Those rental copies were usually sold to those rental houses like Blockbuster for a premium. So if it cost you $15 or $20 to buy a VHS copy or a DVD copy of that movie, it probably cost that rental house somewhere between $45 and $60 for that very same copy. That was the premium that was charged to those rental houses for using it in a commercial enterprise to rent to end users. A couple of weeks after they would hit rental houses like that, those films would then be pushed out onto the broad retail market for you to go actually purchase your own VHS copy or your Laserdisc copy or your DVD copy or even your Blu-ray copy just 10 to 12 to 15 years ago at this point. Those movies would then be licensed out for a very hefty fee to places like HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, Starz, Encore, so on and so forth, the premium cable movie stations of the day. And then once they completed a roughly 1 year to year and a half run, they would become available to downline cable stations, and then maybe a year or two after that, available to broadcast situations. Now, this is something that David Zaslav at Warner Brothers has very publicly lamented in recent earning calls, saying that this idea, this notion that we should collapse the entire long-range distribution model into a 45-day window or to a day-and-date release between theatrical and streaming is the dumbest thing that Hollywood has ever done. I'm paraphrasing on that last part, but frankly not by much. It really was the dumbest thing that Hollywood has ever done. If you doubt me in this day and age, just look at Top Gun Maverick's massive success over this past year. Not only was it a tremendous movie, a great movie that drew massive audiences in and kept them coming back for more and more and more repeat viewings, but that movie was initially slated for a 120-day theatrically exclusive window. It was shortened to 90 days in negotiations between Paramount, Skydance, and Tom Cruise. And for that, Skydance and Tom Cruise got an extra paycheck for that. But even after it left theaters following 90 days, its first stop was PVOD. And it has been the biggest seller on premium video on demand now for the last couple of months. And now, after returning to theaters for about 10 days in exclusive screenings, it's finally going to find its way to streaming on Paramount Plus here in the next few weeks. This is a movie that made $1.5 billion in the theaters and has probably made another 200, 300, or 400 million just in the last few months since it left theaters because of the respect for traditional theatrical windows and traditional post-theatrical tranches. And that's what's missing from most other studios. And that includes Warner Brothers, and that includes the Walt Disney Company. Let's look further into this article. Quote, "I have read the claims that Black Adam will lose money. That is false." Quote, "The picture may be considered disappointing since it had Dwayne Johnson in the DC film. However, the picture will pass a break even and throw off a bit of profit." Now, I want to make this very clear. What Joe Singer is talking about is not from the theatrical window. It is not from theatrical revenues. Black Adam unequivocally, without question, will lose about $100 million, if not more, closer to $130 million perhaps, at the box office based on how rentals are paid out domestically and abroad. But what Joe Singer is bringing into the fray is the post-theatrical revenues that come from downline sources. The problem, of course, is this is a bit of an accounting trickery. Not saying there's anything illegal here or anything that people should be concerned with. As a matter of fact, these are relatively common accounting practices in corporate America. This is what the IRS regulations allow for. Companies like the Walt Disney Company or Warner Brothers or Universal Studios have a multitude of various corporate entities where accounting measures and money and cash flows are shuffled from one to the other to take advantages of gains and losses afforded under Internal Revenue Code here in the United States. The big thing that people need to understand as we look at the chart that Deadline publishes in this article, which we're about to get to, is that there is a big difference from outside third-party revenue sources, meaning legitimate fresh cash flows into a company and to their bottom line, versus journaling assets and cash flows from one corporate account to another corporate account. And this is what has boggled streaming services for the last several years. A lot of folks have made a lot of beans about the recent Disney earnings reports in the last 2 quarters, where they lost $1.1 billion and $1.5 billion successively from their DTC or direct-to-consumer content services. That is largely because things like Disney Plus will stroke massive checks to the Disney studios adjacent to them, be they Pixar or Walt Disney Animation or Marvel or so on and so forth, to acquire properties to put on Disney Plus. Somebody still has to take those bills. Somebody still has to pay those actors and those production companies for producing the work that they do, and the losses have to go somewhere. In many cases, they go to the streaming companies, and that's exactly what is happening here with Black Adam. Let me show you. So here is Deadline's chart as made up for Black Adam's P&L. That's profit and loss statement. Global box office, domestic 165, international 225 for a total global haul of 390. Look at the domestic rentals. Look at the international rentals. They are suggesting that somewhere in the neighborhood, and this is estimated based through the end of its run, that somewhere around $180 million is coming back to Warner Brothers. My estimates are closer to $170 million, and that is because information recently obtained from AMC Theaters financial reports show that the international rentals are coming in lower than what Deadline may be estimating here, simply because of FX drag. That is foreign currency drag. Right now, the US dollar has strengthened very much against foreign currencies, which means when those foreign ticket sales are made and they are exchanged back into the United States for US dollars, they are buying fewer US dollars than they were last year. But be that as it may, with $184 million in theatrical haul, based on the Deadline report back to Warner Brothers, their net ticket sale revenue, that still puts them in the hole to the tune of around $100 to $120 million. But what happens here is this. They have lumped in now the post-theatrical revenue. Domestic and home entertainment streaming, $86 million. International home entertainment, $27 million. Domestic free television, $17 million. Domestic pay TV, $36 million. And international TV at $40 million for a total revenue of $390 million. Now, if we look down at cost, we can see production cost, $195 million, which is what Deadline's adjusted figures are based on Warner Brothers reporting. However, they have held their $100 million figure for global prints and ads. Participations, residuals, and global home entertainment costs at $43 million. This is a figure that is a little bit more hard to get a grip on because it involves payouts that need to be made after the movie has run its course to people like Dwayne Johnson and the producers and the directors and people that have back-end participations in the deal. So the total cost they're putting at $338 million with a net profit of $52. But again, I go back to the point that this includes a lot of what-ifs in post-theatrical runs. A lot of those figures that they shared with you in terms of advertising revenue and this or that, these are revenues that have yet to materialize. These things are not out there yet. When it comes to the domestic home entertainment and international home entertainment that's referring to streaming, and this is the kicker, that was almost $100 million worth. The bulk of that, and it even says this in the article, is basically Warner Media paying itself from HBO Max back to Warner Studios. That's right. HBO Max is paying a massive licensing fee over to Warner Brothers Studios. So HBO Max can write off the loss while Warner Studios can show a profit. This is cost shifting. Again, nothing illegal, nothing nefarious. This is something that corporate America does quite well and has done for a long time under legally afforded issues with the Internal Revenue Code. But the issue, what you have to understand with this is that in reality, is this film profitable? No, not really. Even if you include all the cost shifting that goes on inside Warner Brothers, we can take that for what it is. Is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson going to get a little bit of a spiff on the back end? Yes, as will some of the producers and directors and other people involved in the production. That is true. But at the end of the day, there is no third-party licensing. Netflix is not paying Warner Brothers to capture this movie at the end of the day. Amazon Prime is not paying Warner Brothers to capture this movie at the end of the day and put it on their service. Those are held by companies like Sony Pictures and Universal Studios. Sony Pictures has just recently struck in the last year or so a new deal with Netflix, a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar contract. So when we say movies like The Woman King lost money at the box office or might barely break even if they spent no money whatsoever on any kind of marketing costs, that's all right, because Sony Pictures has a multi-billion-dollar deal with Netflix for that movie to go to, along with all the rest of its slate, beginning on January 1st of this year. Same thing with Universal Studios. They have contracts independently with both Netflix and Amazon Prime, both for billions of dollars in multi-year contracts for their animated and their live action slate separately. That's why things like Jurassic World Dominion will wind up on Amazon Prime, and things like Minions Rise of Gru will wind up on Netflix. They're getting paid with outside dollars, not an internal cost shift and internal accounting fun from that end. So you have to understand how this works from a business perspective. Black Adam just simply did not do well at the box office. It's really not making money. It might be making money on paper at the end of the day with some accounting issues at Warner Brothers. Again, all perfectly legal and perfectly ethical. But in reality, this movie just did not do well. But that's it. That's where we are at the end of the day. So I hope you like this video. I hope you learned something from this video. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. Share this sucker out on the social medias. And until next time, take care.